Very much for having me along this evening. I look after the Sustainable Food City Partnership for Bournemouth and Poole, so we come from a very urban perspective. We're a group of around 250 people, businesses, public sector organisations, voluntary community groups, essentially everyone in the town that cares about their food. We work across a really broad remit. It's everything from individual health and well-being, food poverty, using food as a community catalyst around community growing and food co-ops, around engaging people with training and skills and spreading those skills across our communities. We work with businesses to encourage them to increase their local food sourcing and their sustainable sourcing. We work around issues of minimising food waste and supporting the environment, and we also have a very laudable objective all around sharing best practice and knowledge transfer, which essentially means stealing other people's really good ideas, so we do that really successfully. So when we, as a partnership, have looked at the square meal debate, we have found probably most resonance in the areas around good food for all, and how you ensure that everybody along that supply chain gets a fair deal out of the food that's being consumed at the end. Just to give you a few facts about Bournemouth and Poole, I sometimes think that people think there's more affluence in the towns than maybe there is. And everybody knows sandbanks, everybody's aware of the very large houses that you drive past, but there's also real areas of deprivation. And as across most cities and indeed rural areas, we've seen about a 70% increase in the use of our food banks over the last 2 years. Surprisingly, nearly half of the people that use the food bank that's closest to me are actually in employment. Our local CAB estimates that there's about 10,000 children across Bournemouth and Poole who are suffering from food poverty, which is nearly 25% of all the kids on my patch. And as a partnership, we don't think that that's right. One of the challenges that we're looking at is how we revolutionise our approach to emergency food. Seeing people on only 3 occasions when they come for that emergency food support, it just does not work. It provides them with the emergency food they need, but it doesn't allow us to create a relationship with them. And if we can't create a relationship with them, we can't support them to improve their own individual food security. So we want to move the conversation away from the provision of emergency food to much more about prevention and about creating spaces in communities where people can come and engage with food. Whether that's in an existing community centre, whether it's in a children's centre, whether we create something new, whether it's about encouraging super food banks, which provide a lot more support than just the emergency food aid. But creating a space where people can come and they can eat low-cost food, where good quality food is available to them, where they can share community meals together, where they can access growing spaces, where they can learn food skills, buy local food, be part of a food co-op, be able to engage in food in all of those different ways so that their individual security, their individual food security, means they're less likely to fall into that emergency food gap. But also it gives us the opportunity to work with people so they're more confident around food and they make better food choices about what they're eating, what they're purchasing and how they're cooking. We're aware, particularly being in an urban area, that we need to do more around enabling everyone, whatever their situation is, to connect better with their food. And this workshops this afternoon, I think all of us talked about education. But I think it's a word that we have to be really careful about using, because I think when you talk about education, you can slip in to terminology around educating people and providing education to people. And we want it to be more of a two-way process, so we want to enable people to connect and engage with their food. We kind of know that probably won't happen so much and so strongly with a health message. People still smoke, people still drink, people still don't eat enough fresh fruit and vegetables. But maybe we can make it happen around a community message and by making food culture an integral part of every community, whether that's at a neighbourhood level or even down to a street level. So we can start really small and then spread it from those small, fantastic incubator examples. So if my local street can become a street where the whole community is looking at food and is incubating food ideas, and that works successfully, maybe we can spread it to the street across from us and they can spread it to the next street on from them until we have an entire neighbourhood where people have been enabled to connect with their food and then are more likely to make better food choices as individuals. One thing we talked a lot about in the workshop that I was in this afternoon was we also have to be really careful that local food doesn't become purely a middle class, purely a niche product, which people on lower incomes feel somehow isolated from. So how we start expressing and enabling people to connect with local food, I think requires a different terminology from the ones that we've been using. And I think lastly for us, it's also about access to food and looking beyond farmers' markets and looking beyond food boxes. If I want people in my patch to engage with food and to be buying local products, it's no good if the only time that they can actually buy it is between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock every other Thursday. It's just not going to happen. And when you look at other examples across Europe, 16% of farms in France, 33% of farms in Austria are engaged proactively in direct sales. 5% of the food spend in Spain is on local products, and there's over 65,000 Italian producers involved in direct selling, totalling about 3 billion euros a year in sales. It's happening in other countries. It can happen here. But we need to create direct markets that fit with the consumers' lifestyles. It needs to have the availability and the accessibility that traditional and normal supply chains do. And we need to work together to build that robust relationship between the consumers and the producers. I have people in some of the areas that I work in that don't even travel to the beach in Bournemouth. They're not going to come to the countryside in Dorset. They're not going to engage in that way. So we have to find ways of bringing farmers, bringing producers into that urban setting to enable consumers to engage with them more effectively that way. It's also, I think, about providing farmers themselves with the skills and knowledge and confidence to innovate and act as entrepreneurs, because that's what we're asking them to do. We're not asking them to be farmers anymore, we're asking them to be entrepreneurs. And people need support to be able to do that, to be able to understand the marketplace. And we seem to have reached a point where the financial pressures that we've placed along our small producers means they're adding so much value to the product before it hits the shelves, before it hits the consumers, that it's becoming a high-end niche product. And the types of people that I work with, that's not right for them. When I first started this job about 18 months ago, somebody summed it up beautifully by looking at me and saying, do you know what, chutney's no good to me. And it's not. So we need to reevaluate what that marketplace is and reevaluate how we engage local producers with that market. I think finally our message, which is a process we've kind of been going through ourselves, is kind of don't be scared to be bold. The issues are really big. They're really scary, they're quite overwhelming. But this is a prime opportunity to really start making significant change. But to make those changes, we've got to be bold and we've got to be courageous. I think also for these changes to work, we need to be creative. It's not necessarily about always innovating and always trying something new. We've got fantastic assets in Dorset. We've got fantastic assets in the conurbation. It's about being creative about how we think of those, how we make the most of them, and how we can use them to support a thriving food sector. But if nothing else, in the 18 months that we've had working on our food partnership, the thing that we've learnt most is it is about partnership. That the only way we're going to make this work is if all of us are working together, if we all have a shared vision, and we're all prepared to make the changes that need to happen. Thank you.